This is Ollie.
And this is the only podcast that matters.
And it is. It's your podcast. Should I see if I can do it all?
Yeah.
Punk, proto-punk, post-punk, new wave, no wave, grunge, goth, and share.
Man, you've been rehearsing your lines.
Well, I edit it. I keep having to edit.
Right.
I edited a whole episode and then it disappeared and I had to start all over.
That was so fun. I remember how much fun you had when that happened.
Yeah.
And you're like, guess what just happened? This is so fun.
The second we make a penny off this podcast, I'm saving up to make somebody else film and edit. But in the meantime, the plus side is I'm learning.
Yeah, and learning a new skill is cool.
Maybe I'll get to a point where I really like it.
What did we say the other day about like as soon as you stop growing, you're dying, right?
Yeah.
So.
Sure.
Maybe that was somebody else I
No,
talked
it
about.
wasn't me, but it's kind of dark.
Yeah.
It's like really intense.
But like it's easy to grow. True. There's so many different ways you can grow. Like we were just talking about my skincare routine.
Yeah, you're glowing up.
You know what I mean?
You're literally glowing up right now.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So who are we here to talk about?
Jayne County, who would you agree? Because I honestly think I've thought about this most punk rock person ever.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really disagree with that.
I also think Jayne County is a trans woman. I think anyone who is trans in history, in the current administration, like at any point, even if you are not out, like to exist and live as a trans person in a transphobic society is punk rock.
Yeah.
And then Jayne County took it a step further and really rocked her shit, really showed off, really questioned authority.
Refused to back down to anybody.
So unapologetic.
Yeah.
So in your face about it.
Yes.
She's crazy.
Yes.
In a complimentary way.
Yes. And I think it didn't serve her career well. It's not just that. I mean, obviously people are transphobic, but I think that the fact that she was so outspoken about it, really upset the norm and upset people.
Even though punk rock was not commercial, she was really she was a hard sell.
Yeah.
For a label.
Yeah. But within the scene of the New York City that we've been talking about,
a superstar.
She was a goddess.
She's a superstar.
Yeah, for real.
And your favorite bands from here on out, every band that came after, including the New York Dolls put out an album before she did, but she was doing what she did before the Dolls, the Ramones, everything that comes after, every episode we do from here on out, you can credit Jayne County as influencing all of those bands.
Absolutely. She was also credited as the first artist to perform at CBGB.
Yes.
Mistakenly, a lot of people think that Television was the first band, and nothing against Television, but she was the first one.
Yeah,
there.
the Ramones act like they invented that too, but the Ramones did not.
No, it was Jayne County.
It was Jayne County. The other thing is, we were saying earlier, if I've ever felt like what we're doing is useful, it is this episode because it is hard. It is criminally difficult to find things on Jayne County.
Yeah, how many books were you able to find?
I found one book that was her memoir. There's been documentaries I've seen where she was one of 20 people interviewed, but not a documentary about her.
Right. If it wasn't for that Max's Kansas City doc I watched 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have known as much about her. That was the only thing that I learned about.
I found out about her from reading a book about the New York Dolls a year or two ago.
Right.
For the impact she had, for the superstar she was, for how talented she was, it's insanely hard. She's not a household name. Even nerds for punk sometimes don't know.
I wasn't. I mean, I wasn't aware of her until
her band, the Electric Cherries, and it's if there's ever been a reason this podcast is useful, if you wanted to tune in and find something, we did a lot of digging to get this episode. It's hard to find stuff on her, so I feel this is an episode where I'm this is functioning as the podcast I want it to be, where you don't have to do all this digging. We got it, and we're gonna share it with you.
Your nerdiness is finally showing up in a way that's helpful.
Anybody could learn about Max's Kansas City. You can just Google an article and skim it. But Jayne County, we got the gold. Yeah,
there was some great interviews I heard with her, but it didn't spend a lot of time talking about her. She spent a lot of time talking about the scene and other people. But she didn't spend a lot of time talking about herself her childhood and stuff. So I think it was really great that you were able to read that memoir and that you're going to share this with us today.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just sort of matter of fact. She's never very self-absorbed or glorifying herself. She tells the most outrageous stories in the most matter of fact way.
Yeah.
She's and then Stonewall happens. I was just walking to the bar and then Stonewall was happening that day, so I just jumped in.
Yeah.
And you're like,
what?
Stonewall is why we have gay pride. Stonewall was, we're talking about the first brick. Anyway, her career spans 6 decades.
Holy shit.
She was in Atlanta. She was at Max's Kansas City. She was at Stonewall. She was at a couple of days of Woodstock. Like, she was every monumental moment. This fabulous queen, Jayne County, was a part of it. She was a part of the whole thing.
Straight up woven into the thread of history.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. And like, so underrated.
Yeah.
So many people don't know who she is.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to talk about our favorite songs first? We usually do that.
Oh, right. I almost skipped over this. So, not your favorite song, but
our anthem.
If you had a theme song from either her solo stuff as Jayne County or she had a band, The Electric Chairs.
Yeah.
Which a lot of it is the same music.
I think, because I don't remember which I think it's under the band as well. But my favorite, or my theme song, and my favorite song, honestly, is Are You Man Enough to Be a Woman?
Amazing.
Which is such, like, musically, it's really, like, it is, like, punk, and kind of, like, halfway through it turns into a punk song. But it starts out, like, pretty, like, minor chords, and, like, I don't know, like, it's a really, really cool song. Yeah. And her lyrics are just so provocative and in your face.
Her music is just as good as all the other bands that got famous.
Yeah.
My theme song, this is weird because usually I do a song that's so very clearly about a character. Like for the Velvet Underground, I did Femme Fatale, and for Iggy Pop, I did Real Wild Child. This isn't really like a character song, but hear me out. My theme song would be Fun in America.
Oh, okay.
Because this is how I feel about it. Like, French people are really proud to be French, but they hate their government, but they're proud of their culture, right? And, like, I hate the way the United States was built. I hate the government. I hate, like, what it stands for at its foundation. But I love so many things about different cities and places in America. I love so many things about the culture.
Yeah, and the music. And especially,
I could live in Chicago happily. I could live in Philly happily. I'm obsessed with Providence. I could do New Orleans. I did New York. Like, there's so many things across America, so many places that I love. And she just sort of lists off, and she's like, like listing off like food and like Andy Warhol and cocaine and like just the things that were so much a staple of like, I mean, I love traveling abroad. Yeah. But I think I would get a little bit bored in a quaint island or a quaint European town somewhere. And, like, it's weird. It's describing the landscape. It's a weird theme song. It would be a weird, like, intro to a sitcom about my life to be like, I just have fun in America.
That's actually pretty funny, though.
But it's, like, it's the song that, like, I can't relate to all of her music.
Yeah.
And it's hard to pick one sober.
Yeah.
Like, 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have picked 10 different theme songs.
Yeah.
But as a sober person, a lot of those are not relevant theme songs to me today.
Yeah.
But Fun in America, that one and Party in Armageddon and Nighttime, like the ones.
Oh, Nighttime is really good.
Yeah. But again, like she sings about hating the daytime. Like 3 years ago when I was hungover all the time and like my night started at 9 p.m. or whatever.
When the sun went down, I woke up. Yeah.
But as a sober person, I don't hate the daylight.
No.
So like the only one that is relevant to me today really through and through, every single line is Fun in America.
Yeah, that's a great choice.
Thank you.
Well
it's a
played.
Weird one, though.
Yeah, but I understand where you're coming from, for sure.
Well, good, because I gave a really long explanation.
Well, it worked.
If you still didn't understand, I would be like, I got nothing left
I need a new podcast partner.
We just don't see eye to eye on everything. Okay, so the history, like, Jayne County's childhood and teenage years are very informative, very, like, indicative of the person she's going to become. There's some episodes where we talk about, like, Jim Austenberg gave no signs that he would turn into Iggy Pop one day. That is not the case
with Jayne County.
She was always unapologetically herself. She always identified as a girl, as a child. She's a Leo, born in 1947.
Of course she's a Leo.
I know. Superstar. She was born in, I believe, Dallas, Georgia, which is outside Atlanta. 4-room house, toilet on the porch.
Like she was in like rural Georgia.
Rural Georgia. Their stove was like, you put coal on it and heat it up for the whole family.
And this was in the 40s, so that shit was real.
Late 40s. She had a father who was an alcoholic and a workaholic, and he basically was described as a character that just kind of passed through the house. She didn't really have much of a relationship with him. She lived with her mother, her siblings, her grandmother, and her aunt. Her grandmother and aunt escaped her grandfather's abuse.
Okay.
Then her father was kind of abusive. Like she grows up in this cycle of abusive men. And even back then, they used to say, like, one of her cousins that was a girl should have been a boy and she should have been a girl. Like, very early on, she's like 5 years old, and they're joking like that.
So this is her family talking about...
Yeah, there's like her aunts and stuff.
Wow.
She used to play with the neighborhood girls. She used to play dress up and
Right.
play dolls with them.
And you're saying that she had a cousin who presented as more male.
Masculine.
And
They were like, oh, they
yeah.
should have been swapped or whatever.
Wow.
When the neighborhood, not that you would call it this today, but it was called Cowboys and Indians, she would play Cowboys and Indians, but she would be an Indian princess. Wasn't.
She's like, I'm the one you're gonna save.
Yeah, like this is all about me. Yeah. Actually, she's like the high priestess.
That's
of the
amazing.
Game. Yeah, I thought that was a really cute fact.
Yeah.
She used to stuff her bra, like everything. Was really into Greek mythology, really into Cleopatra, really into
yes,
these, like,
that's
classic
all
feminine.
tracks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the Cleopatra thing. Like, so, like, how, like, as early as she can remember, she was identifying as a woman.
Yeah, she wouldn't fully transition until later in her life, but she, in hindsight, was like, you know, it takes her a long time to have this conversation with herself, but in hindsight, her desire to be a woman for a long time presented as drag, but eventually she came to realize, like, it's not that I want to be a woman, it's that I always have been a woman.
Yeah, absolutely.
When she looks back at her childhood, she's like, it wasn't a desire, it was who I was the whole time.
Yeah.
She grew up in a very transphobic time.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, did this present...
And it was homophobic even back then. Like,
Yeah,
never
right.
mind trans people.
Yeah, absolutely. But did this present issues with her in terms of, like, socializing and, like, growing up in high school and stuff
She
like
was
that?
aware that she had crushes on boys, but she mostly kept to herself.
Kept
and then
to
she would
herself.
have sort of, like, secret flings. There was something in middle school and something in high school where she would have these sort of, like... they would hang out in the treehouse and they weren't, like, publicly seen together.
Right.
And she would have these, like, little flings with boys, but she was very much on the DL. They were really on the DL. One of them kind of got ashamed and went to college and never spoke to her again and
Right.
just tried to be straight and, like, stuffed down his, like, yeah, just very homophobic time. She had an Aunt Laverne who was very rock and roll. Very much introduced her into, like, Elvis and all the cool stuff. Very early on, she's being exposed, like, she was a rock and roller. Like, she had the outfits, she had the records, she got her into collecting records.
Yeah.
So she has this influence. She's very, very young, clearly identifies as a woman, and very, very young getting into rock and roll. Like, this is what she is. She's the most rock and roll woman ever.
Yeah.
And it all starts very early on in her childhood.
Yeah, I mean, so even in her high school years, I mean, I was also thinking about, like, she was listening to the Beatles and the Stones a lot. Like, those were, you know, her big...
She was really into, like, the British...
Yeah, she was really into the
Beatlemania.
Beatlemania and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that means, like, so she was born in 47. So, in high school, she's already, like, really, really heavily into music.
Yeah.
And most of the people that we've talked about thus far weren't really into that, like, Beatlemania kind of stuff. Like, like, she came from a more traditional rock and roll background, I guess, is what I'm saying.
It was more traditional rock and roll, and also, like, for as much as her aunt was very rock and roll, her mother was more conservative. Her mother also got, like, weirdly into religion. And
Not surprising.
I think there was a couple different religions, and then eventually she got really into, I believe, like, the Methodist church and became very culty about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so her aunt was, like, very radical, but her actual upbringing with her mother was very traditional. Like, the Beatles were a lot back then.
I mean, there was a burning of Beatles albums, so people
True.
considered it to be the devil's music.
That's
even back
true.
then. So
To me,
I'm
it's
sure
just
it
so
wasn't
corny.
welcome. Of course, I'm sure it wasn't welcome in her home.
So her mother, when she was 12, converted to the Methodist church, and then a few years later converted to a Protestant church. And this is when she became, like, really a religious nut, and her father started being like, I can't deal with you.
Yeah.
And something very formative for her was her father was having an affair with, like, a much younger, like, an 18-year-old.
Wow.
Really gross. They
Wow.
had, like, also little siblings. She was in middle school or high school at this point. The mother finds out, gets the crazy aunt and Jayne, gets them all in the car, goes to the, like, truck stop gas station where they know that her father's hooking up with this young woman. They're in the car. Like, they see them. The mother gets out of the car. The aunt gets out of the car. They, like, pull this girl out by her hair and start wailing on her. And like Jayne joins in and is like beating up on this girl, the other
Poor
woman.
girl.
And Jayne's just like, yeah, they just beat her ass. Like and then the same aunt had multiple husbands, I believe, and just shot one of them straight up in the head.
Oh my God.
He was like being abusive, and he was like pounding on the door after she kicked him out of the house, and he was trying to break in and whatever, but like clean.
So she comes from a family of women who don't take bullshit.
She blew her husband's head off. Like
and even her mom is like not taking that shit laying down.
Like talked about like abusive men in the family, women who weren't standing for it.
Yeah.
Like women who were like
crazy. Which makes a lot of sense when you see her career later and all the shit she got, the fights she got into.
This is what I mean. Like everything you learn about her teenage years and her childhood, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there. Nothing comes as a surprise, I think, for anyone who knows her as a kid.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Like they didn't know what punk rock was, but when it came around, they were probably like, oh, that's what you call her.
Yeah.
You know, like we didn't know what she was.
We didn't know what to call her.
She loved horror movies too. She was like very obsessed with horror movies. That comes into a little bit of some of her characters and some of her love for like shock.
I can see that.
She's always been into shock factor. She's one of the most shocking
artists
of all time. So by the time she's 16, she's like starting to dress up and walk around town as like Cleopatra, like I said, like these different historical figures, these different women to kind of get attention. She's not really on a stage or anything. She's not really like in drag in the sense of like what drag queens were doing at the time, but she's starting to push the limits. She's like begging her mom to buy nice wigs. They can't afford like nice wigs. By the time she graduates high school, she walks down the aisle for her graduation in like full on lipstick and like I think high heels, something like it's starting to present drag.
Wow, that's impressive. Because that's no small feat in like rural Georgia.
In Dallas, Georgia.
I have a hard time saying the word rural.
It's not a nice word to say.
Rural,
yeah. Do you watch 30 Rock? Do you know
the
rural
Georgia?
Yeah, everybody go look that up. So she graduates and basically immediately leaves Dallas and heads for Atlanta. And she's like not too far. And in Atlanta, she starts to see like real drag queens for the first time. She meets some people who are like going to change her life.
Right.
A few in particular, the screaming queens.
Yeah, I think she just called them scream queens, and the reason I thought of this is because you mentioned like her love for shock horror or whatever. So this group of queens would get all dressed up, all dolled up, go into like the department store and like get on the like just ride the escalator.
Yeah.
And then they would like point out random men and be like, "He fucked me last night and he has a tiny dick."
By the way, I should have said at the top of this episode, go watch an interview with her so you can just picture
accent,
her voice.
Her accent is so good, yeah.
She has an amazing voice. She has an amazing accent, and she has an amazing sense of humor
about
herself. She's very funny. She said when they used to as scream queens, they used to go out and they called it wrecking, where they would just go wreak havoc. They said they had a pair of shoes for walking and a pair of shoes for running.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I love that story. That's such a good story because they'd have to run. Funny. Yeah, and this behavior didn't stop. Like it carried on through with her into New York too.
They used to do this thing where they would like purposely go to like certain parts of town that were more homophobic, and they would walk around the block, and like the challenge was to see like who could make it around the block without getting queer bashed.
Right.
Like they were taunting.
Right.
The homophobes in power. Like this is what I mean. She's so punk rock as a trans woman. Like she was going out and being like, I'm in drag, I'm gay, like fuck with me. Like let's go. She would walk around, like strut her stuff, and they would literally like kind of be like goading people to attack them. And then doing this sort of for the thrill of it, the shock factor, like I don't know. It was an activity.
This is fucking dangerous behavior. Like
it's dangerous behavior today.
Yeah, and people got really hurt in that time in the South for acting that way. Like people died. People were killed.
Well, they got arrested for being in drag.
Yeah.
For the rest of her life, starting at this time in Atlanta, it would happen again later in New York. There's so many times that she got arrested for being in drag.
Yeah.
She went to prison for presenting female.
Yeah.
And then they would take her into jail, and the way the queens could tell if you were just in jail was they would shave your head. You would have grown out your hair and had bangs, and while they had you overnight, they would shave your head and send you back out on the streets, and that's how you could tell a queen had just done time.
Thank God for wigs.
Yeah. I love wigs. When I shaved my head, I wore a lot of wigs.
I didn't know you. When did you shave your head?
Oh, I was like probably 21.
Okay, before I knew you.
Yeah. I was like 21. I shaved my head. And
If I wanted to present more femininely, I would wear wigs all the time.
Yeah,
because you can change your identity and like that. Yeah.
Sometimes I would want a shaved head, and sometimes
actually, I've worn wigs many times. I had a mullet wig that I wore when I went to Soul Power every time.
I've seen you in
You've
pictures.
seen me, yeah. So I'd go to Soul Power with sunglasses and a mullet wig.
I think we have pictures of you wearing it with me. Actually, I think I have a picture of us together, and you're wearing the mullet wig.
I gotta get another one of those because it really made me feel awesome.
My hair's kind of too long for wigs now, and I just think about sometimes shaving my head and then making this hair a wig so I could wear this hair again if I want.
No
but
problem.
also have a shaved head if I want.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into wig making. I have to learn the podcast thing first, but then I think
that's your next skill.
I'm also like working on some clothing stuff right now, but eventually one of my hobbies might include.
Are you gonna do a clothing line of punk vest for babies?
Yeah. Should I tell everybody real quick? For sure. I have a 2-year-old niece who's like so punk. Literally likes punk music, likes metal music, responds very well to this music. She's super cool. She doesn't like dresses. Like, she's a punk baby. And my brother is punk. Her mom's an artist. Like, they totally lean into it. And when she was about a year old, I got a little tiny vest and a little jean jacket. My brother ripped the sleeves off, and I added all these patches.
Yeah.
And she's going to outgrow that soon. So now I have a new black denim vest, and I'm putting all hot pink and bright yellow patches, and I'm lining the inside, and I'm really going all out on this one. And throughout her life, I think Auntie Ray's thing is going to be until I can teach her one day how to make her own vests and sew them. But I'm lining the jacket. I think I want to make maybe like other articles of clothing. I used to sew a lot. Maybe sew some stuff for me, sew some more stuff for her. But I'm very much into like dressing a punk toddler right now. I call her Punk Baby.
That's great.
She's so cool.
Yeah,
she has these, like,
she really is cool.
Glasses.
She's really cool.
She's very cute.
And so cute.
And I've been working diligently on this new vest for her so that when I go out to Chicago and see them in a couple weeks, I can have it ready.
Perfect.
While I'm there. Yeah.
It looks great.
I'm going to start selling Punk Baby clothes.
I think you could probably, honestly, like, that would be a good thing.
I could sell at least one to them. Start charging. I'm like, I made it. Do you want it? $50.
$20, yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, where are we?
Okay, so I have a couple of things from this time.
Yeah.
Queer slang that they use that's like very much like queer slang today. One of them would be like, you know, like when people say like, oh, that's a good read. She read me. She's like a good read. You know that
but
one?
I'm so bad with slang.
Yeah, so it's like to like take stock of someone and like.
Okay, all right. So that is what it sounds like.
Yeah, like I read you. I dished it out. Like I summarized you in a catty way, like whatever. So something that was telling somebody off then was to read her beads. This drag would have beads. And then another thing was like, don't get upset, don't pop your pearls.
That's fucking great.
And that was their queer slang back then. In Southern queer slang.
Right.
During this time.
I can hear her say don't pop your pearls in her accent.
I got her accent. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to just like, you know how you can pay like artists to do cameo videos?
Yeah.
Like Jayne just say don't pop your pearls.
Just like an outgoing voice message on your phone.
Ray's not here right now.
Don't pop your pearls. That would be amazing.
And she said at this time, like, nobody had the time to differentiate between gay, lesbian, bi, trans, like all of this stuff. Like, they didn't have the term non-binary. There are certainly people with the experience. She said they didn't really label these things. Everyone was just kind of queer.
Right.
Which I feel like is starting to be what we're doing again. I feel like we got really into labeling for a long time, and people really stuck to these, like, very particular labels. And I think my experience is the more I try to learn about myself, the more I don't really find a specific thing fit. I'm just like, it's queer. And she said back then, very much, it was, you're gay or you're straight.
Yeah.
And that just encompassed all types of queer people.
Right.
So later on, when these labels would come around, she was kind of like, so what?
Interesting.
Yeah, never really like one for labels. Which is why I also think it took her a while to identify as a trans woman, because she was like, I just am who I am. I'm not straight. The rest of it is sort of...
It's for me to know and you to not care about.
Like, it was her journey, you know, that she was going on. So I think if you're not particularly interested in labels, how are you going to arrive at one for yourself?
Yeah,
no,
that makes sense.
How to get there.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean? If you're not searching for a term for yourself, it might take you a while to find the one that suits you.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Like, I'm fine with saying fuck labels.
Yeah.
That's very punk rock.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
So while she's in Atlanta, she gets her first, what she calls her first real boyfriend.
Okay.
It's this guy, Sandy. And again, he's bisexual, but they don't really like, they're like, why does he fuck guys and girls? And they're just not calling him bisexual. They think he's confused. He's like very mentally unstable. She finds out he's like fucking a bunch of other queens that are her friends behind her back, like ruins a bunch of friendships. Kind of has a meltdown. She ends up visiting him in a mental institution or whatever. But he's also like her first real boyfriend, and she
are they like out? They're like out with it in
they're
public.
like I mean, at least in her community.
Right, of course.
So at this point in time, there was like gay parties that technically would be illegal, but because the cops were like, well, it's keeping them off the streets if they all go gather in this house for the night, then they're not walking around in our community. So the cops would kind of know about it and let it be. And so like in that community that they weren't really gay clubs yet, but there was like sort of gay house parties and stuff, like areas that they would go to. In that area, at least, she was openly with this man, Sandy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But he was sleeping around with all the queens.
A little slut.
What little slut, Sandy? Sandy is a slut.
And he was like mentally out of the point where he was committed.
Yeah, he was like very unwell.
But he wasn't just committed for being gay. Like
no.
Because that was the thing.
Like, no, he was very depressed. I think he was depressed enough to be a danger to himself.
Okay.
It sounded like he was like very unwell.
Yeah.
And very unstable.
But she's kind of stood by him through all this bullshit.
She like stayed his friend, and she eventually, I think, repaired most of those friendships because this also like sex was treated very casually for her. I don't think she like treats sex as much as like this like precious thing as almost a commodity sometimes. Like or just a matter of fact, just a thing you do.
Yeah.
You just fuck.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it was like this high and holy thing to her.
Right.
It was just an activity.
Right.
And she just liked men and would fuck them. And I don't think it was that deep.
Yeah, right.
I mean, sometimes it was, but I think for the most part, she
it was also probably scary to have feelings for people at that time. Like, you're like, how far can this even go in real life?
Yeah, so true.
Maybe I don't want to catch feelings about this person.
Yeah. And then have to like hide it. Oh, do you want to do the Queen Elizabeth thing?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing like this is most interesting for two reasons. Like, she had met one of the queens was a model in the department store in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the name of it, but she was completely everybody in the department store was completely unaware that she was in drag.
Yeah, she was passing.
Until one day, somehow the manager like caught her changing or something.
Yeah, somebody walked in on the dressing room.
And then she was fired.
Yeah.
Which is fucked up. But her name was Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And this became one of her band names later down the road. And so, like as an homage to the
first band in New York.
It was the first band, yeah.
Yeah.
So as an homage to this queen that she met in the department store who was like a window model, right? I think.
Yes.
Because they used to do that back in the day.
Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
She was like classically beautiful.
And
she was passing, and I think people felt like horrified when they found out, which is just so fucked up.
But back in the day, literally, they would have not mannequins in the windows. They would have humans.
Humans, yeah. Isn't that creepy?
Super creepy.
Yeah. She's pretty much like ready to move on to she's always ready for a bigger and better thing.
Yeah.
So she hops on a bus to New York. She spends about 6 months technically homeless. Like, she immediately finds other queens. She immediately finds a gay community. But she's sleeping on people's couches.
Wait, hold on. I have to really quick. Like, the first day that she got to New York, she gets off a bus in like Times Square or something. Yeah. She's trying to find the Village because she knows that that's where her people are.
Yes.
And the guy gives her directions to the subway. And she's like walking down the subway tunnel, and she just thinks it's a tunnel to the Village. Like, she's just going to walk there.
Naive,
and then she gets down there, and there's like a train, and she's like so confused.
Yeah. So the other thing is, on her way on the bus, on the way to New York, they stopped in, I think, like DC. She got off the bus to go to the bathroom. She got on, and her bags were all gone. So she arrived in New York
with nothing.
Nothing. The clothes on her back. Yeah. No money.
And
nowhere to stay.
She admittedly was very naive. I mean, for New York City, you know what I mean?
Respectfully to Georgia, like,
they got nothing on New York City.
Yeah. Like,
and this is like the early 70s, and shit was real.
I think it would be hard to accept Providence if you're from Dallas, Georgia. Never mind New York City.
And this is the time in New York City when like there was a lot of crime again. So this is a very dangerous time.
Do you know? She actually was going to New York City because it would be easier there to hitch a ride to like the Summer of Love hippie shit going on.
That was
the other
why
side
she
of the
was
country.
okay.
She was going to New York
to go to West Coast
to get a ride to the West Coast because it was easier than finding a ride from Atlanta. There was more people going,
right?
And then she showed up with no money and no clothes and nothing because she got robbed, and just was bouncing around on people's couches. 6 months come, the winter is there, it's getting a little more tough. Her father says, I'll send you money to come back home with.
Right.
So she goes back home to Atlanta for a little bit before she has her like real stint in New York where she goes and doesn't return home for 20 years.
Yeah, right.
So she does this stint for a minute.
That must have been so frustrating to have to leave and go back to Georgia.
So while she was back in Atlanta, she worked at a hospital. She was presenting as a woman, and she got arrested at some point outside of work.
Yeah.
She gets arrested for being in drag again. Like, this just keeps happening. And then she gets released, goes back to work, and the cops who arrested her called the hospital she worked at and outed her.
What the fuck?
And then they fired her from the hospital.
So she was hiding in plain sight in the hospital in drag.
And then they were like, they outed her as a trans woman, and the hospital, the transphobic fucking hospital, fired her. So fuck
That's
that hospital.
fucked up,
Fuck that transphobic culture. It's really fucked up. She lost her job. She got arrested multiple times for being herself.
No wonder she wanted to leave.
Yeah. Right. And it's not like New York was safe, but it was safer.
And it was accepted. It was more accepted. Yeah, you didn't get arrested
well,
for
at least
being
in
in
certain
drag.
neighborhoods.
Right, in the village it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So how does she find her people? Like, what is the beginning of? You know what I mean? Like,
so she finally goes back to New York. Now she goes back to New York, and she will not return to Georgia for 20 years. She meets Lee Black Childers.
Oh fuck yeah.
The photographer.
Yes.
So I can't wait to do an episode on. So many photographs. If you're a nerd and you follow these bands, so many photographs you've seen are Lee Black Childers photos. They become fast friends. They meet and they're instantly best friends. They instantly move in together. They will live together and be friends for the rest of her.
I didn't know that. I love that.
They're besties.
I love
they
that.
lived together for the next however many places she lived.
Right.
They had other people living with them, and they'd be like, yeah, we're gonna go back to living just
Yeah.
Like they were fast friends. They were very sweet to each other, very supportive of each other. I've never read of such a like wholesome friendship in the scene, because between like being so punk rock and the drugs and the rock and roll and all this stuff, like a lot of the relationships in the scene can become very like toxic, and or people
are fucking each other over,
or get sick of each other or whatever. But Lee and Jayne's friendship, as far as I can tell, as far as where I've gotten to in my research, it's just very sweet and wholesome.
Yeah.
And like they're just buddies.
Yeah.
It's very cute.
That is really cute.
They meet, and immediately the first time Lee meets her is like, do you want to live with me? And she's like, I would love to not be homeless.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. So she immediately finds that crowd, and then Lee is already, he's not an established photographer, but he's already in the scene. So through Lee, now she's meeting other people, and she quickly meets other drag queens.
Because Lee was gay, right? Or am I misremembering that?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Lee is gay. Do you know about the Theater of the Ridiculous?
I do.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's how it starts in terms of like her stage.
Right.
She gets involved.
She starts doing these parts in plays.
Yes, all these drag queens and all these queer people are putting on the Theater of the Ridiculous, these ridiculous, shocking, sexual, overtly like ridiculous plays. She starts getting different parts
but like,
in
just to be
them.
clear, like they were ridiculous and over the top, but they were not. They were well rehearsed and they were like well put on.
They were also professional.
Yeah, they were professional as fuck.
They were shocking and obnoxious, and maybe not for me. But they took their work seriously.
One of my favorite things that she tells about that time is she's like, I had one of my first lines was like, I just was wearing a dress and I came out on stage and I pulled like a plastic thing of dog poop out from under my dress and was like, you scared the shit out of me.
Yeah. It was a lot of like really immature toilet humor.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like really pornographic stuff.
Yes.
That like, and by the way, like Andy Warhol would come night after night to these plays and would eat it up and start writing his own stuff.
Patti Smith shot up Speed on stage at one of these things. Like these are serious.
Patti Smith was a lot of these, but fuck her because she's transphobic to Jayne.
Yeah, she does.
When Jayne starts like officially really transitioning and starting to take hormones and
Patti
all
Smith
that
treats
stuff,
her like shit.
Patti Smith acts like she's so weird, and it's like, first of all, Patti Smith, you're weird.
Your face is weird.
Your face is weird.
So
yeah,
let's leave it at that.
Yeah. Anyway. Our fucking podcast. So her and Lee were living together, and there is this guy, Rocky, and she hated Rocky. There was a couple other queens that would like come in and out of the household. One of the queens, I think, was dating this guy Rocky, as far as I can tell. And she hated Rocky, and she just wanted him out, but they didn't really have a reason to kick him out, and he was paying rent, and other people wanted him there, and she was kind of the only one who wanted him out. So she would start like to drive him crazy, like she would like go into his closet and just with a razor just pick at the threads of his shirt, so when he went to button his shirt one by one, the buttons would just pop off. every shirt in this man's closet, every button of every shirt.
Oh my God.
As soon as he went to put it on, they weren't already off.
Yeah.
They were popping off.
There was like one string
yeah,
left. Yeah.
She's like very clever. She's very smart. She's she's a creative
and
person.
deviant, clearly.
Yes, yeah. She would sneak speed into his drinks at night. So
has it ever happened? Does anybody ever like dosed you like with uppers by accident?
Not that I know.
It sucks, dude.
Really?
As like you and I love uppers.
Yeah, but when
like,
you don't know,
when you're trying to go to sleep, and somebody gives you a Xanax, but it's actually a fucking Adderall, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, he would do this regularly, and he started losing his mind. Like, why can't I sleep? I'm an insomniac.
Yeah.
She literally was like gaslighting him.
It's like more. It's more
and
than
then
gaslighting.
Worked, he left.
It's more than gaslighting. That's
It's abusive
but it worked.
behavior. Yeah.
He dipped.
Yeah, she was drugging him. He left eventually.
Yeah.
To go find peace.
Don't fuck with Jayne.
Don't fuck with Jayne. That's also so funny.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. So then around this time, she treats this like it's such a matter-of-fact, casual thing. But the Stonewall riots, she was a part of them. So the Stonewall riots, for anyone who doesn't know, the pride parades we have today are because of the Stonewall riots. And there is a few trans women. There's a black trans woman, Marsha P. Johnson, who is credited for like throwing the first brick at a cop car. So what happened is these cops would raid the gay bars and arrest people and kick them out. And Marsha P. Johnson was like a mouthy, spunky little spitfire who was like, nah. So they're coming around. And she starts piling trash against the door to barricade it and then lights the trash on fire.
Holy shit.
Like, yeah, fucking come in, pigs, right? So they take to the riot. They're all going out the back door. They take to rioting in the streets. Jayne, this is a famous riot that, thank you, Marsha P. Johnson, for, like, the queer freedom we have today, for the pride parades we have today. Like, this was a huge revolutionary moment for queer people in history. Yeah. And Jayne was just, like, on her way to the bar.
Yeah.
There's like a riot happening, and she's like, oh.
I fuck with this.
So then she just starts walking around and chanting. Like, she just was like, these are my people, whatever. Yeah. So she's a part of this, like, riot where they're just walking up down the street, you know, with their chant saying, like, whatever, you know, we're here, we're queer, whatever their chant was, you know? And she's like, yeah, we would walk down the street and then, like, kind of hit a dead end and be like, all right, we'll go back up the street in this direction. But she was, like, very casually, very matter-of-factly a part of these
a huge moment in history,
Stonewall riots. Like one of the most famous moments in gay culture.
Yeah.
One of the things we should have more gratitude for than anything. Like it was a huge reckoning that these people made with the public of being unapologetically gay, fighting back, rioting back, standing up for themselves in a dangerous way to police. And she was just like, yeah, I was there.
That's amazing.
I was on my way to the bar, and then there's trash on fire at the door of the bar. So I started walking around. So
they were like throwing bricks at, like, this was like a violent protest.
Yeah, there's a phrase like throw the first brick.
Yeah, and that's in reference to that.
Johnson threw the first brick at Stonewall.
Oh my God, I have to do some research on my own about this.
Queer liberation is due to a black trans woman.
Love that.
That doesn't get enough credit. Also, could totally do an episode.
I had never heard her name.
She is so punk rock.
Yeah.
Totally would do a Marsha P. Johnson episode.
Yeah.
Just maybe like a 30 minutes on like, she wasn't necessarily a part of a punk scene, but because the queer scene overlapped so much and because that riot was so punk rock and Marsha P. Johnson was so punk rock, like I would happily do just like a half-hour episode on
Yeah, for sure.
That was like world-changing event for queer people in the United States.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a really important piece of history for queer people to know like their roots and have gratitude for those people, those really brave people in New York City at that time.
Really brave.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's scary shit.
Literally deadly, like
that's scary shit.
Society for them. Yeah. And she was just like, yeah, I was there. No big deal.
Yeah.
Like if I was at the Stonewall riots, I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Ray. Nice to meet you. I was at the Stonewall riots. Like, tell me about yourself."
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be like, "I'm a Gemini sun.
You'd lead with it.
Yeah.
But to be fair,
welcome to the podcast. I'm Ray. This is Ollie. I was at the Stonewall riots.
To be fair, Jayne County has like 100 things that she could identify.
Also Woodstock,
yeah.
She was one of Andy Warhol's entourage for a bit. Like, yeah, what interesting fact should she lead with?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So she met Jackie Curtis and Candy Darling, who are famous drag queens, Max's Kansas City, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, that whole bunch of episodes we've done.
And she references Jackie Curtis a lot as an influence.
Jackie Curtis was probably her biggest influence.
Right.
Jackie Curtis was outrageous. Ripped tights, bright lipstick, messy hair, like very rock and roll.
Yeah.
Very trashy but glamorous.
Yeah.
Like Jayne County said, it's very expensive to look this cheap.
Yeah.
That was all Jackie Curtis's influence.
I love that.
Yeah. Jackie Curtis was huge, and Jackie was very much in the theater scene. She was writing plays. She was the star of plays. She was very influential in the theater scene. She was sort of like the head queen, and like she had minions.
Yeah.
That just kind of did her work.
Her bidding.
Yeah. She would just like stay wherever she wanted and just be like, yeah, I'm staying here for a while. And she was very much like the queen bee of her circle. She really had like a following.
Yeah.
Jayne was never like one of her minions, but was certainly one of her fans.
Right.
Certainly inspired by her. And I think more than anyone else, it's where she got her look from.
Did Jackie Curtis write for the Theater of the Ridiculous?
I believe so.
Yeah, because my recollection is that like Jayne did mostly the plays that Jackie wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so the thing about Jackie was she was not trying to pass. Like
Yeah.
you hear about trans people passing. Jackie didn't care about passing. She just cared about like expressing herself.
Being herself, yeah.
And that's what Jayne will come into. That's what Jayne will start to focus is like, I want to be radical. I want to be colorful. I want to be larger than life. I don't really care if you can tell anything about my
Right.
biology. She's a character she wanted to play on stage. Like
Right.
it became, the more she dove into like being influenced by Jackie and the more she dove into like the theater, the more it became about being theatrical
Right.
than anything else.
Right.
Which is, so the band, like everything she does.
And this, I mean, and this like leads to her influence on punk, right? I mean, her performative aspect of her life then leads to the stage. I
Yeah.
mean, she's on stage everywhere. I feel like that's like the way she sees her life
Yes.
is being on stage,
Yes.
even when she's not on stage.
Yeah. She's always performing.
Yeah.
But being authentic.
No,
Like,
of course.
you know,
Yeah, she's
but, like,
she's not playing a character.
No,
she's
yeah.
but she's
being herself,
performing.
but she's performing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. She started doing some paintings. Like she knew she was like writing some plays. They weren't really taking off. She was acting. She started doing some like really like.
Have you seen her paintings?
No, have you?
Her recent ones?
No.
All right, so right now she has, well, okay, when I say right now, this is like 2 years ago. She had a gallery up and they were all paintings of dicks, but in like really, really, she was quote unquote feminizing the penis. So like there are these really, I'm trying to remember, like I think one of the best ones was like Medusa, but with like these beautiful dick snakes on her head.
Yeah.
So I did look at some of those paintings,
That's so
her
great.
recent paintings, because like now, in her stage of life now, that's what she's focusing on again. I think is painting.
So she was doing these like really dirty psychedelic paintings. But I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah,
seen
for
any
sure.
Of them, yeah.
That's
I gotta look
that's
that
what
up.
those are. Yeah, yeah.
And then she did try to get a band together called Queen Elizabeth
Yes.
in honor of
Of the-
Queen Elizabeth we
yes.
talked about. That didn't really take off right away. Her music career, it was like a short stint. It wasn't something she was taking super seriously
Right.
at that point.
Sounds like she's trying to find her thing, right?
She is. She's experimenting with just art in general.
Yeah.
I have a really funny story. Her and Lee were working at the American Foundation for the Blind, and they were in charge of like shipping like packages, and they would just like get really high on the job
Yeah.
and not really pay attention to what they were doing. And they would like ship out the wrong things. And there's this like one story that this guy was waiting for a cane and they accidentally shipped him like a Braille bingo game.
That's like not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. Poor guy.
Well, like he's
He, like,
fine,
really
I'm
needs
sure.
this cane.
He really needs this cane because he's
Yeah.
fine there waiting for his cane package to arrive. And he's like, thanks for this Braille bingo game.
Yeah.
That's not going to help me at all. But they just like were totally phoning it in. Just They
Yeah.
were just there for a paycheck. They didn't care.
We've all been there.
And they said they fucked up like regularly. This is one of the stories that comes to mind. But she's like, this isn't the
Yeah.
only time
Yeah.
that happened.
Oh man, we've all been there.
Who hasn't been high on the job?
Well,
Narcs.
probably some people.
Not my friends.
Yeah. Not my president.
For real. So late 1969 now. She starts performing at Max's Kansas City.
Yay, we love that place.
See our episode on Max's Kansas City,
Yeah.
which was a fun one.
Which is how I found out about Jayne mostly. Well, that's
Yeah.
not true. I guess we talked about her a while ago too, but mostly
She
the way
comes
that I
up.
found about it was all the stories that she has about Max's are unreal. Like the list goes on and on and on. We talked about some of those last week on the 2 weeks ago on that episode.
There was a Jackie Curtis play at Max's Kansas City called Femme Fatale after the Velvet Underground song. And she said she played a psychotic Southern lesbian prisoner. That was her character. They're like, who's better suited to play a psychotic Southern lesbian prisoner
Than Jayne County.
than our very own Jayne County?
Yeah.
I mean, I would cast her.
Hell yeah.
As that.
I would love to see some of these plays.
I would too.
I wonder if they're
a
probably not
surprise.
on video anyway.
I found something. I don't know like exactly what play it is or what her role is in, but I found something.
You found a video of it?
That I thought we should watch in my theater.
Hell yeah, we should do that.
I don't exactly know what it is, but it has to do with her and it's a play or a movie.
It's such a mystery. I'm excited.
Yeah, I haven't started watching
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but I was looking her up and I found this like movie and I think we should watch it together at some point. I didn't want to watch it without you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be really fun.
I
Maybe
love that.
between now and the part 2 we can watch it.
sounds-
She becomes obsessed with the Stooges. I mean, think about 1969,
Yeah.
right? First Stooges album.
Yeah.
She's like such a fangirl
Yeah.
for Iggy Pop and the Stooges, who are now coming around Max's Kansas City.
Yep.
She's starting to like. This is where like the artists rubbing elbows with each other at Max's Kansas City that we talked about.
Yeah.
That episode starts.
And we're starting to like pile on our episodes now. Like now we're looking at how the Stooges influence our next people.
This is the most self-referential thing I've ever done.
Yeah,
in my life.
exactly.
We're like,
yeah.
we're like every time I'm like, oh, we're gonna do our New York Dolls episode next. Stay tuned. And like, oh, please reference our Lou Reed episode from last time because it really is like not only are we moving chronologically, but like it's this world of all these characters and moving pieces and puzzle pieces and like. In order to talk about this puzzle piece, we have to talk about this other one that we just talked about or we're talking about next.
Yeah.
Or you're like the best Lee Childers story might be in Not the Lee Childers episode.
Probably,
because,
right,
like,
yeah.
They all come up in each other's
Some of the best
episodes.
Jayne stories we did last episode.
Yeah,
Some of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
few that I was like, I guess we don't have to tell this one.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
If you want all of our Jayne County episodes, you
Yeah.
also have to listen to our Max's Kansas
Exactly,
City
yeah.
episode. It's a trick.
Yeah. It's a
get you-
trick.
to
It's
get
a
you to
ploy.
listen to more.
Yeah.
So she did. Can I tell you about this play that's like really insensitive?
Is this something she wrote?
This is a play she was in. I think to get a really good idea, I have the book here. To get a really good idea of the theater of the ridiculous in a way that I don't think we really have the time to do even in a 2-part episode. Chapter 4, this is her memoir, Man Enough to Be a Woman.
Nice.
Yeah, your fave. Chapter 4 really dives into the theater of ridiculous more than any other chapter, and I think to get a sense of how like lewd and shocking and glittery it was, I would recommend just like pick it up, skim through some of that stuff if you're interested. But there was a play where she played a pregnant Sharon Tate right after those Manson murders happened.
Oh my God.
And it was like very insensitive and people ate it up.
Yeah.
But some people were offended, obviously.
But probably not so much in the scene that was going to these plays.
She was playing pregnant Sharon Tate in a sewing commercial.
This sounds like SNL, but like really fucked up.
Yeah, and funnier.
And funnier.
And less funny.
And funnier, yeah.
And then somebody played Charles Manson in the play and was like, kill the pigs, fuck cops, like whatever. Like right after the murders.
Yeah, like not even a year after.
No, like too soon. Like kind of too soon today.
I mean, the theater of the ridiculous is called that for a reason.
But she was like, yeah, but this is how ridiculous it was.
How ridiculous was it?
The pregnant Sharon Tate character was stabbed in the stomach and they dropped like a baby doll on the floor from her dress.
I mean, the prop department didn't have a lot of money, so that's what you got to do.
Or a lot of tact. It's really fucked up
It's really fucked
thing
up.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the memory of Sharon Tate. But that was the theory of the ridiculous. That was one of the more offensive things I've seen.
It's pretty fucking offensive,
Yeah.
so.
A lot of it was like toilet humor and sex jokes and
Yeah.
stuff. That was the only thing where I was like, that's kind of not cool. You know.
There was
a little
also
bit.
like performing fellatio on stage. Like there was
Yeah.
like they didn't give a fuck. They
No,
did anything.
yeah. I would encourage people to read chapter
Yeah.
4 of her memoir.
Absolutely.
If you're a nerd at all, like really get in there.
Absolutely.
Also, it paints a scene of the rest of the drag scene. Like the theater of the ridiculous involved all sorts of people. It had to do with the Warhol entourage. Warhol would write a play called Pork that was totally inspired by this. If
that
you're
she
interested-
was a part of that play, right? Of the pork,
of
yeah.
Pork, yeah.
Yeah,
Which
which is what brought her to London.
So the Rocky Horror Picture Show came out, and anybody who knew anything about this culture going on was like, that is a watered down commercial version of the theater of the ridiculous. Gave no credit, gave nobody
Right.
to everybody. everybody knows the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
And most people you talk to have never heard of the Theater of the Ridiculous. That movie does not exist without being basically a direct ripoff
Right.
of what they were doing.
Didn't I think I heard her in one of her interviews, she talked about one of her first bands opening for Rocky Horror Picture Show at a theater.
Oh, really?
Like they would play and then they would show the movie.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing that.
There was almost a little bit of a like resentment for that movie
I'm
that
sure.
it did so well commercially, and they were like,
"Hello, this is our life.
Yeah,
the fuck?
this is like you're welcome for all the content, basically."
Yeah. I mean, I think that happens anytime something's commercialized. Yeah.
Honestly, if you're the first person to do something, you're not the first famous person to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's kind of always how it goes. Like,
Yep.
there has to be some watered down version that's appealing to the masses.
Right.
You know what I mean? It happens with everybody.
Because if it's taboo, we're all fascinated by it.
Yeah. Basically, this whole crowd is undercredited for their influence on like Alice Cooper, the New York Dolls, David Bowie, like all these people that would become more commercially successful. These are just like the unknowns behind the scene. So the last thing I want to cover today, and this might be a 3-part episode, as we're talking, I think
we've been talking for an hour already.
I'm halfway through what I thought the first episode notes would be.
But she has such a rich life. Like we have so many things to talk about.
So this might be three-part episode.
Yeah. You know what's really cool is we don't have to ask anybody else for permission to do a 3-part episode because it's our fucking podcast.
Our podcast. Yeah.
All right. So what else do you have for today?
So I think what we should talk about before we leave off, and I think next episode we can start talking about what we mentioned earlier, her first band, Queen Elizabeth. But I think before we really dive into that chapter, and that becomes her music career.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more background leading up to this. She starts getting a job DJing at Max's.
Which is a job she'll have like for a lot of her career.
Yeah, she'll go back and forth on this. She'll like leave town and come back and do this. Yeah, it's that's gotta be my number one dream job.
Yeah, right.
Like
yeah.
DJing at Max's Kansas
and
City.
she was doing it in like the back room.
Yeah, like the
cool room.
The rock and roll
yeah.
part. The part that's most relevant to our podcast.
Exactly, right.
Please listen to our Max's episode.
It's really good.
Yeah. That's got to be the coolest job ever. From like the late 60s to like mid 70s, DJing at Max's Kansas City.
Oh, and she also talked about
having control over the music and like Iggy Pop is in the room.
Yeah.
And you're getting paid.
So was she DJing in the first iteration of Max's or the second?
So what I have from this is I think this is between like 1970 to 1972.
Yeah.
That she's DJing. She will like come back to it later, but at least like this era, this is definitely like the second wave.
Right.
This is like she was involved with Warhol's entourage. Those days are behind us now.
Yeah.
Now she's DJing for like a hipper, more punk rock crowd.
Right.
That will only continue to get more punk rock.
Right.
Over the next years. So that's it for her background. This leads us up to before she starts her first band, Queen Elizabeth.
But it's so cool to think about her. You're right. Like you said, like DJing for all these people who are so famous now for like starting this punk rock scene.
Yeah.
And she's the one playing music for them.
Yeah, playing music. Yeah.
Which is like such a good metaphor for her influence
role,
in general.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
just
saying?
Completely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's so real. That's so what she is.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does that. We'll be back. Our next episode, we'll start talking about her
I'm
actual
excited
music.
Because her music is as good, if not better, than the Dolls, than like
Such
everything.
a good example of how a marginalized group of people has to do it
better
harder and better than everyone else and still get less recognition.
Fucking amen.
Such a good example. She is so talented and so hardworking and so important.
So fucking
for
punk
such
rock.
less credit than she deserves.
Yeah.
And we're going to be back to talk about that music career.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really fun.
I am really excited because this has been the most interesting thing that I've researched about this topic. Oh, yeah, for sure.
She's so crazy.
Yeah. And please
so
do
rock.
like check out some interviews with her because you
she's
have to
very
hear her
endearing.
voice when you
She's very
listen.
sweet. And she has a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
About herself and other people.
And she goes off on these rants that are so great.
Yeah.
Really
I would
funny.
highly recommend.
Yeah.
I would not read her memoir until you have heard her voice. So you can read it in her
exactly,
voice.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's amazing.
Anyway, so we'll be back with the rest. I'm Ray. This is Ollie.
This has
for
been
listening.
the only podcast that matters.
Yeah, and if you didn't like it,
just get your own podcast.
Okay, literally go get your own podcast.
Like it's not that difficult.
It's actually a lot of hard work. See you next time.